1985, Flight 303 vanished from radar for 10 minutes. It didn't crash. It didn't divert. It was simply gone. The aircraft was a Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, a workhorse of the skies. It was on a routine flight from Lisbon to Miami. You've probably been on a flight just like it. Boring, predictable. Except this one was not. At 14:03 Greenwich Mean Time, air traffic controllers in Santa Maria watched the digital icon for Flight 303 just blink off their screens. No Mayday call, no final words from the cockpit, just a void where a 300-ton airplane carrying 322 people should have been. The official report calls it a transponder anomaly. That's the technical term for a glitch. But here's the part they don't mention. Transponders don't just turn themselves off and then on again. And they certainly don't take the entire airplane's radar signature with them. 10 minutes later, it reappeared. Same altitude, same speed, same heading, as if nothing had happened. The controller radioed the pilot, Captain John Miller. Miller's voice was perfectly calm. He reported no problems, except one. He told the controller he had flown through a cloud formation unlike any in his 30-year career. He described a swirling, spiraling tunnel of what he called greenish fog that seemed to envelop the aircraft. His description never made it into the public summary of the incident. We only know about it from a leaked internal memo filed away for 2 decades. The official story is that the flight landed safely in Miami without incident. And that's where the file closes. But here is where our story begins. Because what happened on the ground in Miami is the part nobody talks about. When the jet bridge connected, the ground crew supervisor noticed something odd. His watch read 17:45 local time. The cockpit's master clock read 17:35, a 10-minute difference. Captain Miller assumed his clock was broken. Then he checked his own wristwatch. It was also 10 minutes. The first officer checked his. Same result. A wave of confusion spread through the cabin as passengers looked at their wrists. Every single timepiece on that plane, from expensive Swiss watches to the cheap digital alarms packed in suitcases, was exactly 10 minutes behind. Think about what that means. The plane was physically absent from radar for 10 minutes. The clocks on board failed to record that same amount of time. It's as if for 10 minutes, Flight 303 entered a place where time stood still. Investigators called it an unprecedented electromagnetic event, a convenient label for something they could not explain. They collected every watch and clock for analysis, but they missed one. It was a simple analog travel clock, packed away in a passenger's sealed luggage in the cargo hold. This clock was not 10 minutes. It was ticking backwards. Ticking backwards. This single detail, hidden from the official record, changes everything. It suggests not just a temporal shift, but a reversal, an impossible phenomenon. You might think this is science fiction, but the evidence, once unearthed, points to something far stranger than a simple glitch. For decades, the incident was buried under layers of classified documents. Then, in 2019, 3 crucial files were declassified. What they contain challenges every assumption about Flight 303. This wasn't just a commercial jet. This was a test. And the passengers? Unwitting participants. The official report states that all 322 people on board were civilians. But one name on the manifest, a Dr. Eris Thorne, was no ordinary passenger. Thorne was a theoretical physicist employed by a shadowy government agency, an agency that didn't officially exist. His expertise was in quantum mechanics and temporal displacement. You see where this is going, don't you? His presence on Flight 303 was not a coincidence. It was a calculated risk, a gamble that went spectacularly wrong. The government never acknowledged his employment. Not until these documents surfaced. The files reveal project code names like Kronos and Eventide. These weren't just academic studies. They were active research programs, focused on manipulating time itself. The true purpose of Flight 303's journey was never Lisbon to Miami. Its destination was an anomaly, a specific point in space-time. The so-called time cloud, Captain Miller described, was not an unexpected weather event. It was a pre-calculated target, an engineered phenomenon. Think about what that implies. Someone created this temporal distortion. Someone knew exactly where and when it would appear. The aircraft was supposed to pass through it, not just observe it, but interact with it. The objective? To test the effects of a controlled temporal shift on a large vessel and its human cargo.
What do you think happened when they entered that greenish fog?
The internal memo from Captain Miller, the one leaked to the press, contained a single disturbing sentence that was redacted in the public version. It read, "The stars outside, they were wrong." Wrong in what way? The document does not specify. But for a seasoned pilot who navigated by the constellations for decades, to make such a statement, it speaks volumes. It hints at a distortion of fundamental reality. Not just a minor time slip, but a complete displacement. This wasn't a simple electromagnetic anomaly. This was a journey to somewhere else, or perhaps to some other when. The declassified files include a transcript of a frantic communication between Dr. Thorne and an unknown party approximately 3 minutes before Flight 303 entered the cloud. Thorne's voice is recorded as agitated. He warns of unforeseen variables. He mentions gravitational lensing. And then, silence. This transcript was marked Level 5 Classified. Why such secrecy? Because the implications were terrifying. The official story claims Flight 303 returned to normal flight path without incident. But the flight data recorder tells a different tale. For those 10 minutes, the aircraft's internal gyroscopes registered impossible movements. Not just turbulence, but shifts in orientation that defied the laws of physics. One data point showed the plane briefly accelerating to Mach 3, 3 times the speed of sound. An L1011 TriStar cannot achieve Mach 3, not without disintegrating. Yet the data is there, raw, unaltered. It was dismissed as sensor malfunction, a convenient explanation for the inexplicable. The truth is, the sensors were working perfectly. They were simply recording something that shouldn't have been possible. The very fabric of space-time was being stretched and warped around the aircraft. The passengers inside would have felt nothing, not directly, because their own internal clocks, their very biology, was being recalibrated. The clock ticking backwards was a chilling testament to this. It was a residual effect, a ripple, a tiny echo of a far greater temporal event. But what was the true cost of this experiment? And what did Dr. Thorne discover in those 10 minutes of impossible flight? And what did Dr. Thorne discover in those 10 minutes of impossible flight? The answer, you might suspect, is far from simple. It begins not with a discovery, but with a disappearance. 3 days after Flight 303 landed, Dr. Eris Thorne vanished. Not a trace. The official explanation was a sudden, unexplained leave of absence. Convenient, wouldn't you say? His colleagues were told he was ill, but no medical record surfaced. No forwarding address. Just gone. His research notes, however, tell a different story. These weren't found in his office. They were recovered from a safe deposit box, opened only after his disappearance. This box contained a single, handwritten journal. Its pages were filled with equations and diagrams, and a chilling personal entry dated July 3, 1985, the day after the flight. Thorne wrote, "The temporal distortion was far greater than predicted. We didn't just shift in time. We intersected with echoes." Echoes of what? He doesn't specify, but his subsequent entries become increasingly frantic. He details a series of strange occurrences. A recurring dream, always the same. A flash of green light, a faint, high-pitched hum. You might dismiss this as stress, but then you read the next entry. The artifacts are appearing. He describes small objects, a coin, a button, a piece of fabric, materializing out of thin air, in his own apartment. Think about what that implies. These weren't just random objects, they were specific, identifiable, and they were linked to the passengers on Flight 303. The coin was a rare 1978 quarter. It belonged to a passenger in row 27. The button, from a flight attendant's uniform. The fabric, a swatch from a child's blanket. How could these items appear in Thorne's apartment days after the flight? The official report from the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, never mentions these artifacts. Not a word. This deliberate omission raises serious questions. Why hide such extraordinary evidence? The NTSB records from 1985 show no investigation into Thorne's disappearance. No follow-up on the unusual effects reported. It's as if they actively avoided looking. This silence is deafening. And here's where it gets interesting. Dr. Thorne's journal entries stop abruptly on July 10th. His last words, "They know. They are coming for the echoes." Who are they? And what exactly are these echoes? We have to look at the other passengers, all 322 of them. The official story is they returned home unharmed. But a deeper investigation reveals a pattern, a disturbing one. 1 year after the incident, 7 passengers from Flight 303 reported identical, vivid nightmares. Always the same green fog, always the same high-pitched hum, and always a feeling of cold. Coincidence? Perhaps. But then, 2 years later, a passenger named Sarah Jenkins from seat 14A reported seeing her own reflection, for a split second, in a different outfit. A uniform she'd never owned, and she claimed it was moving independently. A hallucination, her doctor said. But then another passenger, a Mr. David Chen from 22C, reported a similar experience. His reflection in an unfamiliar suit. This isn't just about temporal shifts. This is about identity, about reality itself. The government's project, codenamed Eventide, was designed to manipulate time. But what if it did more than that? What if it fractured something? The declassified files from 2019 mention residual temporal signatures, a fancy term for echoes. They believed these were harmless, imperceptible. But Thorne's journal suggests otherwise. He theorized that the extreme temporal displacement didn't just move the plane. It created a momentary quantum entanglement, a brief, unstable link to a parallel timeline. A timeline where Flight 303 never reappeared. A timeline where those 322 passengers were lost forever. And the echoes? Those were fragments. Ghostly imprints from that other reality, trying to break through. You might be thinking, this is too much, too outlandish. But consider this, the analog travel clock found in the cargo hold, ticking backwards. It wasn't just a temporal anomaly, it was a physical object, resisting the flow of time, pulling against it. A small, persistent defiance, a physical echo. The government suppressed this information. They classified it. They buried Dr. Thorne's journal, because the implications were terrifying. Not just for the passengers, but for the very fabric of existence. What if those echoes grew stronger? What if they weren't just reflections or dreams? What if they were doorways? And what if something from that other timeline was trying to get through? Or dreams? What if they were doorways? And what if something from that other timeline was trying to get through? The chilling answer began to manifest in ways nobody could have predicted. Not even Dr. Thorne. You might think the government would have learned its lesson after Flight 303. But you'd be wrong. They saw opportunity. They saw a weapon. The declassified files from 2019 reveal Project Eventide was not shut down. It was expanded. They wanted to understand these echoes. They wanted to control them. Think about what that means. They knowingly put more lives at risk. The official story claims no further incidents occurred. But the classified documents tell a different tale. A series of unexplained disappearances, beginning in late 1985, were quietly linked to the Eventide project. These weren't just random people. These were individuals with known connections to the Flight 303 passengers, family members, close friends, people who shared a deep emotional bond. Why these specific people? Here's the part nobody talks about. Dr. Thorne's final, frantic journal entries hinted at a concept he called temporal resonance. He theorized that the strong emotional ties between individuals could create a pathway, a conduit for these echoes, a way for the other side to pull through. You're probably thinking this sounds like a horror movie, but the evidence, once you connect the dots, is undeniably disturbing. One case stands out. A 6-year-old girl named Lily Hayes. Her mother, a passenger on Flight 303, was a flight attendant. Lily disappeared from her bedroom on November 12, 1985. The window was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. Just gone. The official police report cited parental abduction, but her father, a decorated Marine, was cleared after extensive interrogation. He insisted she was taken by something else. He described finding a small antique compass on her pillow. It wasn't theirs,
and it spun wildly, erratically, even when placed on a stable surface. This compass, according to the declassified files, matched the description of a personal item belonging to another Flight 303 passenger, a retired naval officer. How did it get into Lily's bedroom? No one could explain it. The government never acknowledged the compass, never investigated its origin. Another convenient omission. They wanted to maintain control of the narrative. They wanted to suppress any evidence that contradicted their carefully constructed reality. The truth is, these echoes weren't just reflections. They were manifestations, fragments of an alternate reality bleeding into our own. The analog travel clock, ticking backwards, was not an isolated incident. It was a warning, a small physical anchor from a timeline where the plane never returned. And the people connected to the passengers? They were experiencing what Thorne called sympathetic displacement, a gradual, almost imperceptible shift. Their memories began to blur. Their personalities subtly changed. They were becoming less themselves, more like their counterparts from the other side. Imagine waking up one morning and a small part of you is different. Not just a mood, but a core memory replaced, a preference shifted. This wasn't a quick, violent transition. It was insidious, a creeping invasion. The government solution? Containment, not a cure. They didn't know how to reverse it, so they isolated these affected individuals. Under the guise of medical treatment, the facilities were unmarked, the doctors nameless. This was never about healing. It was about studying, about understanding the mechanism of these temporal leaks. They called it the ECHO Protocol, a chillingly sterile name for a program that dismantled human lives. Not for a cure, but for data. The individuals isolated in those secret facilities, the friends and family of Flight 303's passengers. They were not patients. They were living laboratories. Doctors documented their transformation, their memories blurring, their personalities fading, replaced by fragments from that other, lost timeline. Imagine holding a conversation with your spouse, and for a fleeting moment, they call you by a different name. A name that means nothing to you, but everything to their echo. There was no malice in it, just a profound, cosmic confusion. Two realities, fighting for space in a single mind. The official records show these people died of early-onset dementia or unexplained neurological decline, all within 5 years of the 1985 incident. A statistical anomaly, buried in public health records. Nobody ever connected the dots back to a single flight. And here's the part that should keep you awake at night. The ECHO Protocol was considered a success. It proved Dr. Thorne's theory of temporal resonance. It gave the government a roadmap, a way to track and even predict the influence of these echoes. But they never learned how to close the door. They just learned how to watch what came through it. The declassified files from 2019? They were a carefully managed release. A story with a beginning and an end, designed to close the book on Flight 303.
They told you about the 10-minute gap. They admitted to a temporal experiment. They gave you a villain in the shadows and a mystery to solve. But they never mentioned Lily Hayes. They never mentioned the spinning compass. They never mentioned the Echo Protocol. Because those details don't end the story. They begin a new one, a much more frightening one. Today, the official narrative is that Project Eventide was a Cold War relic, a dangerous, abandoned path. But technology like this, it doesn't get abandoned. It gets perfected. It goes deeper underground. The time cloud over the Atlantic was not a man-made weapon. It was a discovery. Like finding a new continent, a natural, terrifying feature of our universe that we just happened to stumble upon. And we have been poking it with a stick ever since. The echoes from Flight 303 were the first wave, the most chaotic, the most noticeable. But what comes next will be quieter, more subtle. It won't be a spinning compass on a pillow. It will be a flicker in your memory, a song you've never heard, but you know all the words to, a face in a crowd that feels like home for a reason you can't explain. We are left with the consequences, a world where the past is no longer a fixed point, where reality has footnotes, and the echoes. They are still out there, faint ripples in the pond of time. They are the ghosts of what might have been, whispering to what is. And so, the final question is not what happened to Flight 303. The question is,